Welcome, everyone, to the Everyday Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bobby, along with my co-host, Heidi. Hello, Heidi.
Hello, hello.
We are joined today by Sarah Wallace. She is an Enneagram consultant, speaker, and facilitator, I think she said. She does everything to help businesses via the Enneagram, but instead of just fumbling over it myself, I will let Sarah describe what she does and who she is. Welcome, Sarah.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I love the concept of the podcast and excited for this. You did a great job. That's exactly what I would say. I'm a workshop facilitator, and I love, getting to work with both individuals and teams around how to use self-awareness and others' awareness to have not just more productive and efficient workplaces, but also happier and healthier workplaces and ultimately relationships.
Perfect. So I have read a book or two about the Enneagram. I'm nowhere near the expert that you are in it, but I at least know my number and I have some familiarity with it. Heidi, on the other hand, she's an Enneagram noob. That's what they say in the gaming world.
I'm coming in with very little knowledge. In fact, every time I'm around, I have a lot of friends that are all in.
Oh, you have a lot of friends?
I do. And they're all in for the Enneagram, and they want me to be so badly. And I don't want to call myself a skeptic, but maybe I am
You're
a little bit.
You're an Enneagram hipster.
No. I'm a hipster?
You are. Enneagram is so mainstream right now, and you don't want to be a part of it.
I love that. That sounds much better than skeptic. But every time someone will be like, oh, I'm a whatever with a wing, whatever. And I'll be like, yeah, I'm a 10 with like a wing 14. Because I'm pretty sure those aren't even numbers.
That might say something about which Enneagram type you are, just those clues alone.
Probably does.
That's perfect, Sarah. That's exactly why you're here. This is a surprise, Heidi. We're actually psychoanalyzing you.
It's an intervention?
Yes.
Is this an intervention?
Enneagram intervention.
Yeah.
I promise I am here with an open mind. I'm not here to be the skeptic. I'm here to learn. I thought it would be better if I came in just as I am and have that viewpoint.
Yeah. So, Sarah, if you encountered somebody like Heidi, an Enneagram hipster, and you had like 60 seconds to tell her what the Enneagram is, how would you describe it to her?
Great question. So many people are talking about being more self-aware. Oh, I need to be more self-aware. Emotional intelligence. And that is so great. And I agree with that. The challenge sometimes is that it's kind of like women who, put on their own makeup. It's very difficult to get it right without the mirror, right? And so you need that. You can do what you can on your own, but at some point you're going to need to bring a mirror in to get a clear picture of, or a man getting dressed for the day. Make sure you have your tie on right? And so that's kind of how I explain the Enneagram. It's a way to help you get a better view and to see some of the things that maybe are harder to see or maybe more difficult to see about yourself. And then also to have some awareness about the different ways that people are seeing the world that are sometimes very different than you, because we can kind of get in we can kind of wear our own set of glasses, our own lens around and think, oh my gosh, everybody prioritizes this or everybody sees this situation like me, when in reality, there are all kinds of different ways. And so this Enneagram helps you just start to identify, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was a thing. It's a thing. And so it's both very helpful for your self-awareness and your others' awareness.
Perfect. So, again, Heidi kind of joked about, what type she is.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk people through quickly?
How would I go about doing it?
Yeah.
What advice do you give for me to get started?
Great question. Well, I'm curious, Bobby, are you going to reveal what type you are?
At the end of the episode. No,
Okay.
I am a type 9 wing 1. So
Okay.
I'm
okay.
a peacemaker with a splash of perfectionist.
She's writing that down.
Yeah, I saw that.
I wrote it down.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to
Do
forget.
I need to write that down?
Okay.
I feel like I need to be taking
Oh,
notes.
but you can't use that against me.
Yeah, so great point there. It's a system with 9 different types, and we are very complex human beings. So by no means is this reducing, humanity down to 9 types, but things like the wings, different levels of development, different levels of kind of emotional help us add some variety into that. So we can talk about that later, but to help you determine your type, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about your behavior, what you look like on the outside. It's more of a look as to what is driving that behavior. So you could have 10 people in a room doing the exact same thing, but the reason why they're doing that thing could be very different. And so there are both free quizzes and paid assessments out there. I always say that those can be helpful as clues, but that will not be your end all be all result necessarily, because it's a self assessment. It's a self identification process. And so you'll want to look and see, is that true for me? Is that accurate? And so listening to podcasts like this one, reading books, learning about it on YouTube, looking at the types, reflecting on what actually is true, what's not, can be very helpful in the process. People don't love the Enneagram typing process, though, a lot of times, because we want our results immediately. We want to know what we are so that we can go on and share the funny memes and tell our type at a party, right? But part of the growth is in the typing process, where you're asking yourself questions maybe you've never thought about before, reflecting on things that maybe are kind of cringy to think about. But that is where that type starts to unfold. So, Bobby, I'm curious, how did you find out what led you to believe that you were a type 9?
Well, it was actually at a former job. We had a book that everyone in the office was reading about the Enneagram. And the first, I think, chapter, but the first few pages kind of walked you through a test or an assessment to help you learn your type or get a better idea of it. And it was 9 different paragraphs. And it didn't tell you like which type the paragraphs described, but they wanted you to read those paragraphs and then pick 3 of them, rank 1 to 3 which one of them you strongly related to. So it's interesting what you said a second ago about human beings being complex, because we are. I am not strictly a 9 wing 1, just like you said. And in that process, I underlined sentences or phrases that I thought like resonated with me. I underlined something in every single paragraph. It's
Yeah.
just whichever of the 3 I had the most
Mm.
notes in or underlines in, I ended up, checking those types and saying like, okay, I think this is what resonates most with me, or that's what I think describes me. And it turned out to be 9 wing 1. So, and I've noticed, a lot of those tendencies of a 9 wing 1 in myself. So I've carried the label ever since.
So is there a book that you recommend over others, or what do you recommend at least
Yeah.
first?
The book that I recommend is called What is Your Enia Type? And the reason I'm trying to find it on my bookshelf, the reason why I recommend that one is because it's colorful,
Mm.
and it is very much in layman terms. There are so many, probably hundreds of Enneagram
Mm.
books out there, and they can get very, almost feel like kind of academic and very like Bible font. And that's just very overwhelming.
Mhm.
And so I like that book because it's colorful, big print, bold. And like Bobby is saying, like it's just easy to kind of skim and to still get the information without feeling like, oh my gosh, I got to dedicate an hour and a half to learning about this type. And it just feels overwhelming.
So, actually, I'm curious, Sarah, what's your type?
I am a type 7, or I identify most as a type 7, which is known as the enthusiast, the multitasker, striving to feel excited. It's a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times your type ends up being the one that you resist being the most.
Okay.
And that was very true because there were some things in there that I was like, "Oh, I know I'm this way, but I don't wanna be this way," which is helpful. The way that you did it, Bobby, is not necessarily getting to see the labels of the type because each type has, like, a name or
Hmm.
a couple of names, and type 3, for example, is known as the achiever, and, like, who doesn't wanna be the
Of
achiever,
course,
right?
yeah.
And so you can mistype right out of the gate just by looking at, oh, type 1 is known as the perfectionist.
Hmm.
I'm not a perfectionist. I must not be a type 1, which can be really, I don't want to say wrong, but it can be an unhelpful way to go about typing yourself because you're kind of reducing yourself again to a label and to the behavior rather than the motive.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny you mention like poor perceptions of types because my wife is a type 8, wing 9, or she identifies as type 8.
Oh.
And she found this out because she was in a women's Bible study and they were going through the Enneagram. And, they got to what type that Becca identified with. And she was like, I think I'm an 8. And someone in the group was like, no, 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 I don't think you're an 8. The challenger. A lot of people don't want to be a challenger because that has a negative perception about it. People think you're argumentative for no reason. And she experienced a little bit of that it's like if you're a type 8, people are like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry." And that's not how it should be at all. So,
Well, a
yeah.
lot of people will try to guess what I am since I don't know, but they will also preface that with, "Okay, you're not supposed to do this,
But you're this.
but I think
Yeah.
you're this." So why
Yeah.
shouldn't they do that? Tell them why.
Yeah, I will say I agree with that, and also I disagree with it, and
Okay.
here's why. And I just wanna really quickly, Bobby, go back to Becca, your wife, and just make a little caveat about the type 8. For women specifically,
Sure.
it can be very difficult for women to realize that about themselves, that energy, because in church or in the workplace,
Mm.
and just in day-to-day life, women are kind of supposed to be the helper, which a 2 and an 8 are connected. And so sometimes you mistype because you don't want that label, exactly what you
Yeah,
said.
yeah.
And it happens more for women especially. So just there's that. And then why you shouldn't type other people? Well, because this is a system, a framework identifying your motive, really only you know your motive behind why you're doing what you're doing, right? No one else
Mhm.
can they can maybe guess, but that's not going to be accurate. And also, you take away the gift of that journey that I mentioned in the beginning of asking yourself questions you've maybe never asked yourself before. With that said, I do think that sometimes when you're getting clearer, maybe when you're starting to narrow it down, having a conversation with somebody you trust, your partner, a friend, and saying, "What do you see about this in me? Do you see this in me?" Because uh, each of us also have blind spots.
Mhm.
And so having that conversation with someone you trust to give you, helpful feedback in a kind way can be helpful.
Yeah.
They can say like, "I think I'm this way," and like, "Really? I'm experiencing you in a different way." And that's not to say that that's your type. That could just be another clue.
Okay.
Yeah, because there are, and Sarah, you can correct me if I'm ever wrong about this, but there are also certain types that you will then gravitate toward in stress and in strength, right? So, like, I think the example for a 9 is in stress, we take on more tendencies of a 6, I think. And
Yes, look
then
at you. Yes.
I did some homework before. And then in strength, become more like a 3. And I found that really fascinating because I am a pretty laid back person,
Yeah.
just across the board. And what I read was that 9s can often be mistaken as lazy. I often feel very lazy sometimes because I'm not naturally like super motivated to do stuff. But when I am motivated to do stuff, I, I get stuff done. And that sounds a lot like an achiever. The problem is, becoming motivated to do stuff. So it's interesting how, your type, it can kind of help you understand your tendencies, I guess, in stress and in strength
Okay.
as well. So that's what I found out about myself.
Okay.
Well, and that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's one of the biggest differences with the Enneagram from other personality assessments, which I'm a fan of all of them. I think anytime that you can take the time to learn about yourself is a really productive use of time, and it will benefit you greatly, whatever tool you're using. The Enneagram is a little unique in that it gives you, it's more of like, rather than like a label, like here's your 4 letters or here's your color or your 5 strengths. It's more showing you, here's your starting point.
Hmm.
Here's where you're at right now. But by no means do you have to stay here. You can go this direction, and this is probably going to be a really great path to head that way. And so it's very fluid, right? And that's another reason why people can struggle to type themselves, because they might have that core energy of the 9, but they may be in a really great place where they're leading a project. And so they're going to have a lot of 3 behavior,
Hmm.
or they might be really stressed out and like, I don't feel peaceful. I feel very anxious and worried, taking on those stressful tendencies of a 6. So that adds a different layer of complexity. But again, I love it because we're complex human beings, right? Having this complex experience. And so it's more reflective, I think, of real life, of an actual person.
So, how do you see it helping someone beyond what Bobby said? Like, you know what you are, you see those tendencies, but how, like, why do you recommend it so strongly? How does it help us?
There's a couple reasons. One is that I think more than anything, it is almost like a new language, because so many of us struggle with understanding, how do I feel? Why do I feel this way? What do I actually need here? And so without understanding those, you can see right away, miscommunication in your romantic relationships, with your coworkers, with friends, because it's like, I'm upset, but I don't quite know what I'm upset, or I'm sad, or I'm worried, and I don't quite understand why, or why do I feel like I need this? And the Enneagram, not to say that 100% of that description will be 100% true for you 100% of the time, but it starts to give you language to explain that feeling that's kind of at the in the back of your head, like, oh my gosh, this is why I do what I do, or this is why I feel that way. And then when you do that, you can advocate for yourself more effectively, and
Hmm.
tell your partner, this bothers me and I didn't know why, but or I didn't even know what it was, but here's what it is and here's what I actually need. So then you're off to the races with a more productive conversation. Not saying you're never going to have any conflict, but it will help you navigate that conflict so that maybe you can get through it quicker or in a less detrimental way. The second thing that I love about it is that it really expands your empathy and compassion for other people by realizing, oh my gosh, they're not doing this thing to annoy me. They're not doing it on purpose. It's they have this pressure, like for the type 1, to do everything perfectly,
Hmm.
and they feel like they have to execute it just right, and they have to take on all this responsibility. And right away you could say, oh, this person's so critical of others. But then when you start to understand, even if you don't know they're type 1, you can start to kind of see these behaviors and get curious. I wonder what's underneath that. Oh my gosh, like they're this critical to other people. I wonder how critical they are to themselves, and like this pressure that they're putting on themselves. So,
Absolutely,
not
yeah.
saying again, they won't ever annoy you, but you can start to deepen your capacity for empathy. And then the third thing is just, we spend so much time learning strategies, tactics, even about other people, presidents, artists, activists. And spending the time to learn about yourself can not just show up in your relationships, but also show up in living the life that you actually want, not what you feel like you should want. And so it's helpful in living your quote unquote best life, because you're starting to understand what is that best life for you.
I wanted to touch on the first point you made because Becca and we've had to learn over the years how each of us communicates, especially in conflict, because I want to avoid or alleviate conflict as quickly as I can. And in a lot of cases, I'm pretty good at that. Doesn't always work with your spouse though. You can't just be like, perfect thing said, we're done. I nailed it. And especially when it's your spouse, and I mean she has that tendency to want to resolve the issue, come to a concrete resolution. So we have each had to learn how the other communicates. I've had to learn that it's not bad to engage in that conversation and not assume that she's just badgering me for no reason, because that's not what she's doing. She is a problem solver. She wants to figure out, what the disconnection was, right? But she has also done a great job, over the years we've been together, learning that I'm not necessarily just avoiding the conversation and I'm trying to like sweep things under the rug, brush her off, and disregard how she feels about something. And, she has, learned a little bit better to like, I guess, engage me where I'm at and help me understand, like, I'm just trying, to figure out what went wrong. And that's all. And so understanding that from each of our perspectives, it's been really good. It's been really healthy.
That's so true because that is one of the biggest ahas that I have personally had in my own Enneagram journey is realizing the different ways that people process information
Hmm.
and feelings. And especially for a 9, and then as a 7 who only wants to feel happy feelings and avoid anything uncomfortable at all times, I can very much relate to this where I don't know how I'm feeling sometimes, and a lot of 9s and other types too will struggle with this in a fight or in a conflict situation.
Hmm.
There are other types who immediately get a feeling sensation, very in touch with their emotions, very in touch with what they need, and are able to effectively communicate it. It's hard to effectively communicate what you need though when you're still processing, how do I even feel about this?
Right.
And my mom is a 9, and she will get mad about something a week later because she realized, you know what, that actually really upset me. Like that actually did make me mad. And so if you're somebody who processes really quickly, it can be incredibly frustrating
Hmm.
to feel like this person's not engaging, they're ignoring, they're shutting down, stonewalling, when in reality, it's no, that's the story I'm telling myself. They just need time to process. And so if you can give that other person time to process, and then if the person who needs time to process can communicate, I need time to process, that it just is just so much more helpful in eventually resolving the conflict, even if it isn't, in that exact moment.
Absolutely. So Heidi, you're a type 10. Sarah, what would you
Uh-huh.
tell how should Heidi communicate with people?
With a wing, what, 14?
14 with a wing
We're
14,
the
I
wing
think you said.
14.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I am retired now, so as we said in one of the previous
All the time in the world.
episodes, I'm an expert on resting.
Right.
But now I have time to explore different things for myself. And I don't know if he mentioned this to you before the podcast or not, but I was a school counselor. So I know everybody's like, what? How can you be a school counselor and not be into the Enneagram? But I did not have the time to go down that. I didn't make the time for that. But now I'm planning to. So I promise, do some self-exploration. But I'm curious about your journey here. Like, how did you get to this point to become an Enneagram coach? Wait, you didn't say coach.
Consultant,
An
facilitator, and
Enneagram
speaker.
Consultant. Yeah. Yeah, that's you got it. One thing, so I had been working for myself for a couple of years doing marketing and sales consulting for small business owners. And I was realizing I was giving really great advice, right? I mean, I had good strategies that worked for me, that had worked for other people. And I would say, just do it. And I remember specifically there was a client I was working with, and he was like, okay, just do it, just do it. And then it would be the week later, he would still be thinking through something. And then another week would pass. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, why is he? And I was getting frustrated and I wasn't able to help him move forward because I was saying, just go for it, try it. If you fail, oh well. And then at the same time, I'm on this personal journey with my own Enneagram type and learning about myself. And it started to click. And I was like, oh my gosh, here I am identifying with this energy that just kind of is like, let's go far and fast and we'll just fix it along the way. We'll in real time, we'll just shift as we need. And then there's other types that, like we were talking, need a little bit more time to process or want to research before they feel like they're ready to move forward. And so I started to realize how important this understanding of the way that different people were seeing the world was. And so I just became even more obsessed with the Enneagram. And then I started to incorporate, I got my Enneagram coaching certification and I started to incorporate a little piece of it in our initial kickoff calls. And then I just more and more started seeing how beneficial and important understanding yourself was more than an actual strategy. So it didn't, I mean, there's lots of good advice in the world and there's tons of good advice. It's just not every piece of that advice is going to work for you based on your personality, your history, your stories that you're telling yourself, your privilege. So there's all kinds of different things. And so rather than starting with a strategy, which we need, but that comes after you understand more about who you are,
Mhm.
where you want to go, and the best way to get there for you. And so now all I do is get to talk about more of that person focused first, that
Yeah.
awareness, and then that management piece.
That is cool because that's a very different style than I think a lot of, I guess Western society especially, not as much time spent on understanding yourself.
So when you're coaching, when you're consulting, how are you going about that? Are you did I hear you have a YouTube channel, or what did you say a
I
minute ago?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. Yes, share my videos and conversations from the podcast on there.
Okay.
What's the name of the podcast and the YouTube channel? You can do a free plug.
Thank you. It's called Enneagram MBA. So helping us understand people at work, including
Okay, say that
ourselves.
one more time. Enneagram
Uh-huh. MBA.
MBA.
Not NBA, not National Basketball
Yeah,
Association.
not NBA. Yeah, no, not that. Although, maybe there's a twist out there. Maybe there's a niche for that.
If this doesn't work out, you can start teaching the Enneagram to professional basketball
Oh
players.
yeah. I mean, yes, I think there's a niche for everything. That could be something. You're on to something, Bobby.
But do you have a process that you follow with someone one-on-one ever, or
Yeah, I do more workshops and team building
okay.
events now, but when I do, and I still have a handful of clients, one-on-one clients, and what we start with is, yeah, understanding their type and then looking at their goal and looking at, they're there because something has not been working. And so we look at what has not been working, maybe why, kind of matching up, okay, that's not working. Oh my gosh, it makes sense. And then it's permission to try something else. Also looking at the best way to get there. So, not saying that your Enneagram type is related to your social media platform preference, but there can be some clues as to, a type 3, you want to be more visible and you're very comfortable being in the spotlight. So, having a YouTube channel, being the host of a podcast might make sense for you and your strategy. Whereas somebody who prefers to be more behind the scenes, maybe it's a blog, maybe it's an interview style podcast where
Hmm.
the light isn't always on you. And so that's a very surface level, but you can start to say, well, this YouTube expert told me that, being the host or I need to start my own podcast is the best way to reach people, but is it the best way for you? And so you just really start to question advice, your own beliefs around what is the right path for you to be successful, and even questioning, what does success look like?
Of course, yeah. So you actually made me think of another question I had wanted to ask a few minutes ago. What are some of the biggest barriers to entry you've encountered for people learning about or even engaging in the process of the Enneagram?
Think it's a lot of times it's, who do I want to be versus where I'm actually at.
Sure, yeah.
And so this doesn't work for everybody. You have to have a willingness to be self-aware. You have to have a tool and a skill to help you be self-aware. So the Enneagram is one of those, and there's others out there, but a lot of times people will, mistype because it's exactly kind of what you were talking about. But on the flip side, it's like, I want to be a peacemaker, or I want to be the helper, or I want to be these things, but I'm not actually, or that's not my natural tendency. And so you can kind of get on the wrong path. So that's a big one, and one of the most common challenges when you're starting out.
So if Heidi did not like books and wanted to find
That's a lie.
something,
I love
wanted to
books.
find something virtual to help her get
Mm.
started on an Enneagram journey, do you have any resources that you would refer people to learn more about themselves?
There is a website called the Enneagram Institute. I actually use their $12 Enneagram assessment for a lot of my paid workshops and paid assessment opportunities. And they have a ton of information about the type, about mistyping, compatibility, stress, health, every arrows, wings, all the things that Bobby was talking about earlier.
Arrow.
And so that would be a great place to start if you're more of a kind of want to pull something quickly up on your phone.
Okay.
Awesome.
But the book you recommend the most is What is Your Enneagram, right?
Enneatype.
What's your Enia type?
Enneatype.
Enneatype.
Yeah. What is your Enia type? Because it's colorful and very easy to read. I think it's an easy read.
Does
Yeah.
it have lots of pictures?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
I'm
It is.
sold.
There are so many good Enneagram books out there. That is just the one that I would recommend for getting started.
Okay, awesome. So we touched on it a little bit earlier, just scattered throughout the podcast, but how would you say the Enneagram can help your work life? You've talked about using the Enneagram for team building in an office setting, a business setting. How can the Enneagram help in a business, small, large, whatever?
I think, on an individual level, I think it helps you identify if something's not working, if you're feeling frustrated at work, if you continue to have the same problem over and over again. We don't want to necessarily know this about ourselves, but we are the common denominator in all of our relationships. So if we continue to have the same issue with the same person, the first place to look at is yourself. And then it might also be, a part of self awareness is also understanding the type of environment that you thrive in. And so, even like, maybe you need to switch up your office, or maybe you need a window, or just even little things like that. Understanding more about what is important to you and then
Mhm.
what's not. So, what do I need to really kind of go to bat for, and what can I let go of when I'm talking with my boss or a coworker. It can also be really helpful in the job searching process, asking questions, knowing what you need. Now you kind of know the questions to ask the interviewer.
Sure.
What type of person am I going to be working for? How is that person going to, match with my personality? What type of environment am I going to be on? What type of flexibility or structure exists? The other thing is that, like you said, on a team, functioning better on a team. We're always going to be around other people. And so, as the leader, understanding your leadership style and then knowing that not every person on the team is going to be motivated in the same way. So, what might
Mhm.
motivate somebody with that type 8 energy might just completely shut somebody else down. And so, you don't have to necessarily know everybody's type as a leader, but understanding, okay, let me ask these questions, or let me start to notice these things so that I can help my team be successful. But again, there's not one best way. It's really understanding individually the people on my team.
So I have a question that takes us sort of a different direction, but because I'm coming from a career in education with young kids,
Yeah.
what's the age range that you would study Enneagram or Enneatype?
the Enneagram type.
Okay. The Enia. I'm learning. I'm learning here, people.
Have you even been paying attention? Come on.
I'm trying. It's a lot. Enneagram type. So, like, how young would you go to learn that? Because part of me thinks teach them young what they are, but then again, the other part of me is like, well, they're not fully formed yet. They're still learning who they are. So, do
Mhm.
you wait until a certain age, or how would you recommend that?
That's such a good question. Most Enneagram teachers out there will tell you that, you really should not be typing children because their personality is still getting developed. And then the risk of saying, oh, you're this is kind of what we were talking about earlier about
Right.
labeling people, right?
Mhm.
And so for that, for parents, and there are Enneagram and parenting books, by the way, so that could be helpful for your audience, to learn about your parenting style. And then also, again, just start to see the tendencies, the patterns of all 9 types, and getting just an overview of those. And maybe you start to notice some things in your kids or your students that you're teaching. It doesn't mean that you have to label them right away, but just understanding, wow, they really want to be emotionally expressive, and so how can I balance that with my parenting style or teaching style? Or they're not speaking up, or it's again, it's a lot of stuff that you probably did as a school counselor anyway. It's just giving kind of a language around how to explain it, how to say it, how to think about it. As a child, though, yeah, even teenagers, I know some teenagers kind of get into it, start to learn about it, and that's great. Just be cautious to not put yourself in a box. They say that your Enneagram type is very much a mix of nature and then nurture. And that's why you can have, 3 siblings grow up with the exact same parents in the exact same environment, but how they perceived the world kind of helped define their core motives and patterns and behaviors in adulthood.
It's interesting too because I know a couple of other type 9 wing ones, and I see in some respects we are very similar. My dad is one, and he and I are very similar in a lot of ways, but then in a lot of other ways we're very different. And it's just interesting, again, coming back to the whole labeling thing. Type 9 wing 1 is not the end all be all of who I am, but you really can see people growing up with different backgrounds in different circumstances now, the same exact type, approach life so differently. It's very fascinating to see that because according to, the logic of labels, we should be exactly the same and not deviate at all from the same behaviors, reactions,
Mhm.
etc.
And I have taken a person, I don't remember which one it was because it's been years back, but in a professional development workshop, we did some kind of personality testing while we were there. And I had the hardest time because I landed in every one of them. Like I was like you said before, you were underlining in every paragraph. And so it came down to the point where I was like, well, these are almost all even. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But it sounds like this one would be easier to feel a gut connection with.
Yeah. And if that's the case, it's just continuing to ask yourself, what about this? Yeah, what am I really resonating with here? Or what am I not resonating with in the same type? Like what is not feeling true for me, to help narrow it down. It's kind of like, like a not to say that you are a dog, Bobby, but it's kind of like, we have different types of dogs. We have the pug, we
Easy.
have the German shepherd, and you could say, okay, the type 9 is like the German shepherd. And you got the wing one. So maybe, that says something about a specific type within that German shepherd species. But at the end of the day, like, each dog personality is incredibly different. But when you say German shepherd, you kind of have some generalizations that you can make about the behavior of that dog or what that dog is going to look like, right?
Hmm.
And so it's kind of like the Enneagram. It just, when you start to use it within your circle with your partner, it's just a way to kind of not all labels are bad necessarily. You got to be cautious of them, but it's like, okay, knowing that you are a type 9, I can make some assumptions. I shouldn't assume that those assumptions are all 100% true, but I can kind of have a way that I'm approaching you and kind of speed up
Hmm.
that process, because it's like, oh, a bird is a label. And rather than saying, oh, this creature's flying through my window with feathers and it has a beak and eyes, we say it's a bird, and we kind of know what that means, right? And then there's different pieces of that. And so that again is kind of like that language. It's like, okay, this is what this generally means about a type 9, but I'm going to know never to put anybody in a box or say, oh, we can't hire this person, they're a 9, or we need to let them go because they're a 9, or I can't date a 9, right? But it's just having some generalization so that maybe you can ask, what about that? Let me get curious about that. So I don't know if that makes sense. I'm just kind of talking now, but
No, I'm following you. And I have a question too, if I can put it into words.
yeah.
So I'm imagining one of two ways to handle this. So if you were taking the Enneagram test and you were not happy about where you feel like you're landing, like that's not really what you want to be, is it about owning what it is and handling it the right way, or is it more fluid where you could self-explore and make changes to your personality essentially and your life choices and how you treat others?
Yeah, that's such a great point, and that's one of the things I love about the Enneagram is that it is very much a like you are here, but you don't have to be forever. It's like a map, and ideally, the more awareness that you have about yourself, about others, you will kind of move vertically up that they call it in the Enneagram world levels of development or levels of health, and actually behave less like that stereotypical type, still be driven, have that fire of the type 9 or the type 3, whatever type it is. But because of the growth and the awareness that you're having about yourself and others, you can absolutely change your behaviors and your patterns and your reactions. A lot of times in my workshops, I'll use this example of like clapping your hands. So if you were just to clap your hands, your listeners can clap their hands right now. You're not going to think about it. You're going to clap your hands. But if I said, hey, clap your hands above your head or clap it the opposite way, you can still do it. It just took a little extra step to be more intentional about your default mode. And so that's really what the Enneagram is shining light on, is where you're operating on default mode. And that's okay to be on default mode. It's just we probably need to open up the hood of the car and check to make sure that default mode is serving us the best, and then make changes along the way as needed when it's not.
Yeah, those are two really good analogies. I wasn't a fan of the first one at first when you compared me to a dog, but that
I need to
those,
work on that one maybe.
yeah, no, they
Everybody loves dogs.
that's true. Everybody does love dogs. No, that's a really good way to think about the Enneagram, because I know I'm more complex than just a 9 wing 1, but it explains a lot about why I react and why I behave in certain ways. And so I think that's a great point, Sarah. Then that extra amount of intentionality can start to bring about changes in your personality.
Right, and not just make excuses for them.
Yes.
Oh, I did that
Yeah.
because I'm a 9 or
Right, Heidi. Yes. That is like one of the red flag. Be
Mhm.
careful with that. I just actually had a conversation with my boyfriend last night. We were on a run. And one of the other insights that the Enneagram can share with you is where you tend to make decisions, like your gut, your feeling,
Hmm.
or your head. And obviously, we can have all three. We absolutely do. But again, there tends to be one that is the predominant default mode. And ideally, you want to bring all of them in. And I was just saying, I have realized some growth in myself. And then I'm trying to get more in touch with my feelings, and then like how am I feeling, because as a 7, 5, 6, 7s tend to be more in their head,
Hmm.
and kind of forget that they have this body, and that they like kind of go into problem solving mode or planning for the future and not allow others to have feelings. And I thought, I feel like I'm really growing and I'm getting out of my head and allowing people to express feelings even when they're uncomfortable and getting more in touch with like how do I feel, not how do I think I feel. And so just one example of what that growth would look like and how you can start to actually look not like the stereotypical type.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that's something that people can often lose sight of, the idea of growth. And I've found myself kind of, getting caught up in like, oh great, I know what I am. And
Yeah.
yeah, nines are great. I love being a nine. And
Yeah.
my instinct is, I mean,
You have
obviously,
your own cheerleading squad.
oh yeah, well
We
nines
are
nines are called the
nines.
crown jewel of the Enneagram. So
Oh my
basically,
goodness.
yeah, we're basically the best. No, actually, sorry, just quick side note, Sarah, one thing that I had heard about nines is that they tend to have the hardest time self-diagnosing
They do.
because they have a better innate ability to just relate to other people, and so they'll see a lot of characteristics of other types, but it's like pretty widespread. So then the answer is, oh, well, maybe you're a nine, So, but no,
Yes, that's true.
well, and I'm a contented person, so my instinct is to be like, I'm the best type. I did it. I've made it. But there is supposed to be growth. There's supposed to be an evolution of your personality, your behaviors, tendencies, and you're supposed to get to a healthier place. And I think that's a great point.
Heidi, how do you feel after this conversation? Like, are you more curious? Are you more open to learning your type?
I actually have become a little more curious just because it's a constant. It has been a constant
We've been badgering her like crazy. We will force you to learn your Enneagram type.
during praise team practice or things like that, during downtime when we're talking.
Banging on her windows at night, classic stuff.
Texting me late at night.
Yeah.
No, I'm curious. I am curious. And I thought about studying it before this podcast, but thought with discussion with some different friends, they're like, no, I think it'll be good if you come in with the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just why I did it. Haven't done it yet.
Well, and we kind of, I think we landed on that dynamic would create the best conversation, right? Because, I mean, Sarah, you are the expert. I'm familiar enough with it to have a conversation, but it's good to have a perspective that really is not
Yeah.
familiar with the Enneagram. So you do kind of get almost live. I mean, people are listening to this later, but for us right now, it's live, getting to let Sarah give you a little bit of insight and education into the Enneagram. So I think we're convincing her little by
I'm
little.
not going to have the memory you guys have, though. Like, you guys saying, like, they connect with the 6, who's this, and the 5, who's this. And I'm like, good gracious, I'm probably barely going to remember what I am. I'm not going to remember.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's a meme and it's like, I forget the actor, but he's like so disheveled. He is just a hot mess. He has like a almost out cigarette in his mouth. And then he's like, all these calculations are on the board.
Oh,
And then
That
the
was the
meme was
other
like me explaining the Enneagram to my
is it that meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? He's like
Maybe.
looking at the wall and he like looks all crazy and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
got the strings, tied to all these
It's like
papers on the wall.
connecting. Yes, that's it. It
Yep.
looks like you're solving a crime.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
If I'm
it's like, oh,
honest, I'm not
connecting.
a math person either. So,
Yeah.
I'm a little put off by all the numbers. But
Well, but it's not addition or subtraction. It's like 9 different boxes and you just have to,
I have no memory for
to
numbers.
pick the right one. Yeah. It's actually a complex equation. You have to take the 9 numbers
I'm out.
and then you multiply, then you add the 1.
Just
and
give
then
me
you
a
subtract
number.
here.
It's
Yeah.
fine. I'll be that number.
Yeah, a 10 wing 14. That's what
There you go.
Heidi is in conclusion. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you were able to join us today, Sarah, and that together we could strong arm Heidi into learning about her
Not at all.
Enneagram type.
Yes.
Yeah.
Peer pressure.
Yeah. Well, and the promise of being able to communicate better.
I feel
And
like I need to pull out
Yeah.
one of my school counseling lessons on peer pressure.
Yes.
This
Maybe.
is positive. This is a positive peer pressure that exists. So it's good.
we'll have to get into that later.
No, there's
Yeah.
positive peer pressure. It's good. It's going to be good for me. And I loved meeting you. You are very fluent in your knowledge. I love it. It was very, very good for me.
Well, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. I love this idea of the show that you all are doing. And I love more than the idea that you guys are making it happen because how many ideas are in the idea graveyard. So congratulations on the launch of the podcast and making it happen. I'm
Thank
excited
you.
to listen along.
You will be memorialized as expert number 2 on the podcast. And Sarah, I mean, I think the conversation went great. We'll have to have you back on sometime when they add the next 9 numbers of the Enneagram. We'll get you
Right.
to
Well,
come weigh in.
I don't want to deter Heidi, but they say there's actually 54 types because you add in the wings, and then each type has 3 flavors, and so you might be one of those flavors, but we'll just stick with the 9 for now, and then we can talk about 54 later.
Yeah, that's gonna have to wait till another podcast then.
Dun dun
Dun,
dun.
dun, dun.
There might have to be another after I know what I am.
Oh, that's true. Then we can figure out your flavor.
I'll have to send you a message when I know what I
Yeah.
am.
Yes.
Or we'll do a live reveal. Yeah.
That would be so fun because now I feel like listeners are very like, what is
she?
What is Heidi? Tell us.
Or we'll just be mean and not reveal it for like 3 years. Just keep people, every episode remind people like, oh, wait, do you remember we talked about the Enneagram and Heidi's number? Well, she doesn't know it yet.
Lindsay's out there screaming her guesses right
Oh,
now.
yeah. Friend Lindsay.
Yeah.
She's determined to know. But anyway, yeah, Sarah, thank you once again so much. Like Heidi said, you're very fluent in Enneagram speak. You're also fluent in English, which was helpful for this podcast. So thanks again for that and speaking so well. It's been a pleasure. Really has been.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor and so much fun.
Of course. And that's going to do it for this episode, I think. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you know an everyday expert that you think we should talk to, leave a comment below or send a message to the email address in the description. If you're an expert yourself, we want to talk to you too. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get more awesome content and updates on future episodes. See you next time.